Hello, everyone, and welcome to not just another episode of Lords of Limited. We've got the Bloomburrow crash course here for you. My name is Ben Warney, and joining me on the line, as always, Mr. Ethan Playful Shove Sachs. I assume there's going to be some taunting, some poking. I'm ready to get into the grading differences already.
No. I won't get heated. I'm going to be perfectly calm. The decibel levels will not rise. I'm going to be a new
0% chance. 0% chance.
No, I already actually for the first time ever. Usually I just go in blind. I'm prepped. I went through and looked at the grading differences that we have. I've got my arguments all ready. I'm prepped. I got my dukes are up and we're going to get into it pretty soon.
Ooh, I like it. I'm usually prepped,
I know
so
you are.
maybe that's why I win normally. Oh, got him.
Deep breaths, serenity now, stay calm. Yes, we are going to be doing the Bloomburrow crash course today, folks. And if you've never joined us for new set season, welcome. We're so excited to have you. And we do things just a little differently around here. We won't be doing a full card by card set review, though, as I've already alluded to, we have separately graded each common and uncommon in a spreadsheet where you'll be able to download the show. You can check out that spreadsheet along with some other sweet tabs about removal and combat tricks, etc. But so we're going to look at some big picture stuff, though I think we are going to shortcut. I liked the sort of changes we made for Modern Horizons 3 of just sort of like, we can do this and highlight some stuff as we see fit. But getting to the grading differences, I think, is going to be the best. And then a little bit of a rejiggering in terms of we'll be looking at 3 top uncommons. And then as we talked about in the Plooster era, in the Play Booster era, I think commons don't need as much weight. And instead, we're going to try something a little different here, and we're going to be doing a top 10 commons overall, like notable commons we want to talk about, just full stop. Doesn't have to be an equal color spread. And I think that's going to be fun. I'm excited to just sort of chat about how that list came about. And then, of course, I think in this era, probably we just need to have this is like the signpost uncommons. We'll have a top 3 of those as well. So some card rankings at the end, a big chunk of dickering and dealing and disagreeing about some cards in the middle, and some big picture stuff at the top. Ready to get into it?
Absolutely. You know I love nothing more than arguing with you.
All right, first things first, let's chat about the Patreon page. Patreon.com/Lords of Limited is where folks can go to give back to the show if they so choose. We have a lot of great perks over at the Patreon, and I'm brainstorming. Ben and I haven't even had a chance to chat about this, but I've got some big swings in the future for the future of Lords of Limited and our Patreon. So I'm excited about that, but wouldn't be able to do that without the fantastic support that we have over there from our listeners. So really appreciate each and every one of you there. New set season is the time to get in on the Discord if you want, and that's what everybody who gives back via the Patreon gets access to. Just a great spot to talk about all the card previews now that they're out. Certainly everybody's going to be getting their tier lists together, doing some practice drafts together before we've got early access next week that you and I are going to get to participate in, and then of course everyone's pre-release on Friday before the set goes live in about 10 days from when this episode drops on Magic Online and Magic Arena. So it's just a very exciting time. Everyone wants to break the format wide open, and I think the Discord is a great spot for that. And we have some great perks as you move up the reward tier rankings as well. And we want to shout out our new patrons the first week that they join. So this week we're welcoming Nicholas, Connor, Dom, and Jonathan. Thank you. We really appreciate your support.
Yeah, cannot say thank you enough. Those folks know what's up, and you should be getting in on the Patreon at new set time as well.
All right, so we first want to check out some stats in the format, basically looking at how creatures and removal line up. Now, we have a normal spread in terms of the number of creatures, right? About 100 at common or uncommon. And in terms of their toughness, about the same breakdown you'd see. It's about like a fifth 1 toughness, a little bit more 2 toughness, going back down to a fifth 3 toughness, like all that stuff. So I just want to sort of bump down to chatting about the removal and what's like really interesting about that. And the 2 things that stuck out to me, or the one main thing that stuck out to me, is black and red have over half the removal in the format. And we have about 21 removal spells and 6 and 5 respectively in black and red. Black's removal is almost all, save for a -2/-2, it's all kill a thing, whether that's a thing that's the greatest power or mostly it's just kill a thing, exile a thing. Red weirdly red's 5 removal spells are a deal 1, a deal 2, a deal 3, a deal 4, and a deal 6. Haven't seen that variety of a spread before there. Green has 3 bite and or fight spells And I am rejoicing because clunky colorless removal is back in the form of Bumbleflower's Share Pot, which is a 2 mana, makes a food, and then you can pay 5 tap sack it to remove a non-land permanent at instant speed, or at sorcery speed, rather.
Yeah, that is a ton of removal, and white and blue get good removal spells as well. Maybe not
Yes.
the amount, but every color has good interaction. And I remember thinking when I was looking through the previews that there were a ton of black and red removal spells as well. So good to see that confirmed there.
And even beyond that, the stuff that we're not counting, as I said, we'll have that removal tab in our spreadsheet, even not counting or not included in those removal spells. There's a whopping 3 counter spells in blue in terms of interaction, plus 2 bounce spells, right? A bounce an opponent's thing plus run away together, which is bounce one of your things and one of your opponent's things. And we've got 2 in green, 2 naturalize / plummet variants as well. So those 21 removal spells plus all those other variable ways to interact, there's just a lot going on, I think, in terms of interaction. Now, the question is, and I don't know if you have a feeling on this so far, what do you think? Is this going to be a removal is really important set? Is this going to be a removal is kind of secondary set? It's tough to know for me because like it does feel so, I don't know if synergistic is the right word, but it does just feel so focused of like your 2 color pair is doing the thing it's doing, and removal feels supplementary to that a lot of the time as far as like where you're going to be picking it.
Well, I think it's streamlined is the word I would use for the color
Okay.
pairs. They feel very focused, but I think that I kind of intrinsically bumps up the value of removal because if you can do your thing while disrupting your opponent's thing,
Mm-hmm.
your thing's going to be better. So there's that going on in some senses. There's also synergistic removal spells, right? There's the black removal spell that lets you forage. Like that could be a pretty big deal. Red
Hmm.
and blue, by their nature, if you're casting instant sorceries, are going to fuel up the instants and sorceries matter. They're going to power up your creatures. So I expect red and blue removal spells to perform well that way. But just by the sheer amount of it, I mean, I assume it will be the usual. Premium removal is great, and the clunky removal you're hoping to never play.
Yeah, limited is solved. No news here. What's going on with the new and returning mechanics?
If we take a look at new and returning mechanics, there's a lot of mechanics and a lot of streamlined archetypes, but there's not tons to glean here, I don't
Hmm.
think. We had a lot of the set previewed last week, and we're like literally every gold, multicolor, uncommon, and gold common, which is pretty unusual. But if we go into it a little bit, so we've got Forage, which is the green black mechanic. There's only 6 cards there, and we're going to see a pretty similar theme of like for each color pair, there's about 6 to 7 cards, commons and uncommons, that care about that color's thing or that color's mechanic. The thing that is interesting to me about Forage only having 6 of those is going into it, I initially was thinking that the hard part of foraging was going to be getting 3 cards in your graveyard or getting a food token. And it makes me wonder if this is going to be like from Wilds of Eldraine with Bargain, where like cards
Hmm.
that actually say forage are the choking point rather than having food or enough cards in your graveyard to forage with.
That's a good shout. I like that comparison. Now, I think also the question is like, for my money, I feel like your forage fodder, which is either for folks who don't remember or just tuning in or whatever, forage cares about you either sacking a food or exiling 3 cards from your yard. I feel like you're gonna be sacking food a lot more than you're gonna be having that stuff in your graveyard, especially because of that crossover with graveyard matter stuff and threshold, which is in black, and black green is where the forage stuff happens. So I feel like you're going to want to be sacking food, and so I could see it that you have more cards that say forage rather than the fodder for it.
Well, I think my initial inclination is that you're hoping to never cross over forage and threshold. Those are two very different, distinct things.
I do think there's gonna be, we were talking last week about there was no fixing at the time it was previewed. We'll talk about the fixing a little bit later on today. There is some in the format. But I do think the one bleed I see is like some Sultai graveyard decks. But I don't think, again, I don't think if you're caring at all about threshold that you're ever foraging 3 cards out of your yard. That's just
Correct.
insanity. Yeah.
Yeah, you're just foraging food tokens then. And the cards that are geared towards enabling foraging primarily do make food tokens. It's
Hmm.
that more than it is dumping cards in your
Well,
graveyard.
and one of the cool things, it reminds me of Escape from Theros Beyond Death is the actual cards in the set that are food that can find their way to the yard. Like my favorite, the carrot cake from last week, that's like basically makes 2/1/1s, and then you can sack it as a food and it goes to your yard. So that's like one way to be forage fodder as the food on the battlefield, and then it's a third of your next forage in the yard. I think those cards are going to be pretty premium for foraging.
Yes, I could certainly see that. But again, I would say that forage is foraging. And even if you're doing Sultai graveyard stuff, that's more Sultai threshold than it's going to be
Correct. Yeah.
Sultai foraging. Because I think if you try to dip your toes in too many different places, I think you're just going to lose some of the punch that's offered, because the punch that's offered is very clear and very
Yeah.
good. And especially in terms of things like red white or black white or white green, like they're decks that are going to hit hard and hit early. Like this looks like a pretty quick set to me at first glance.
Yeah, I do think that's true.
All right, so if we take a look at gift next, there is one payoff for gifting, which you should not be building a gift deck. Just want to state that out front. But we do have Jolly Gerbils. It says 1 and a white for an uncommon. It's a 2/3, and it says whenever you give a gift, draw a card. I picture that more as you're going to play Jolly Gerbils just because it's fine stats if you've got some gift cards. And if you manage to string it together, sure, you're going to give your opponent a gift to power up your card while also drawing a card. So
Right.
you shouldn't be trying to build 3 Jolly Gerbils and like 10 gift cards or whatever. It's just let it happen if it happens, I think, and don't force it. But gift as a mechanic spread across all the colors, not super powerful. Like a lot of the gift cards are pretty underpowered, or you are hoping to not be gifting things to your opponent, I think. But
Mm-hmm.
it does as a mechanic reward and understanding of like knowing when the game's going to end or how valuable the resource you're giving your opponent is, like because there are going to be a lot of times when it is right to give a gift. I mean, your opponent's not going to be able to crack the food if they're dead, or they're not going to be like, the card doesn't matter if they're dead in their hand. So you just have to be aware of things like that.
Right there. I mean, there's an interesting card that I don't think we're gonna talk about, but it's the blue draw spell. It's 5 mana, draw 3, and you can gift a tapped fish with it. And if you do, you get to stun a creature, which on first glance sort of seems like, well, why would I want to do that? But like part of the thing about tapping out to draw 3 cards is like, oh gosh, what is the onslaught? I'm not affecting the board this turn. What's the onslaught I'm going to face? And you have this nice trade off of, okay, you get this 1/1 fish, but I don't have to take a hit from your 5/5 this turn, and then I'll be able to recoup next turn when I untap and have my 3 fresh cards. So that sort of stuff I think is very, very interesting.
Yeah, I'm kind of into that card. I wonder if there's going to be that card plus a bunch of removal as some sort of
As a
a
control deck.
control deck. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bath Song 2.0, baby. So we move on to Offspring. Each color gets 2 cards with Offspring. That's the mechanic where you can pay Kicker essentially to make a 1/1 token of the original card that has all the same abilities. So every color gets 2 of those, 1 common, 1 uncommon. The white and the green ones are pretty good, and a lot of them are good in other colors as well. I mean, I think black's got 1 clunker, red's got 1 clunker. I'm trying to remember, but Offspring's evenly spread out. Offspring cards are great. Just make sure that you remember to cast them without the Offspring kicker when it's appropriate to do so for your
Yeah.
curve. Like don't hold them in your hand and strand them for value.
It does seem like Offspring and Gift, and even Forage to an extent, or like the sort of as we've chatted about the like tension between Forage and Threshold, that while I think I'm sort of anticipating that the like maybe draft slash deck building portion of the format is not so interesting, but I do think there's a lot of knobs to be turned in game. I wonder if this might actually have some pretty satisfying, interesting gameplay, or at least tight gameplay in the sense of like spending Offspring or gifting stuff, etc.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I am very interested to see how this format turns out.
That sounds like very skeptical of my take.
Well, I'm not skeptical of your take. I just the format looks so straightforward to me.
Mm-hmm.
Streamlined and straightforward.
Yeah.
Like it's very clear where cards are supposed to slot. Now, like the drafts could be really messy though as a result of that. Like it could be hard to find your lane, or maybe you
Hard to
found your lane,
pivot
but you
out
don't
of
get
the
the piece.
lane.
Yeah, maybe you don't get the pieces you need. So it could still be skill intensive in other ways. We'll just have to see when we get into it.
Sure.
So if we look at Valiant next, and we're just gonna like speed through the rest of these because it's mostly the same things. But Valiant, there's 7 cards, all red and white. You're going to want repeated ways to trigger it that aren't costing you a card, like things that are on the battlefield, maybe an equipment or maybe a creature that untaps things or whatever, along with some well-timed tricks. But expending, all red and green. Gaining or losing life, all black white. Your opponent losing life at the beginning of your end step, all red black.
Yeah.
Threshold, all blue black. Spells matter, all blue red. Like it's boom, 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 boom. Like and if you can find some bleed in those things, I think that is going to be a cool thing for the format. But as of right now, it all looks very slotted into certain archetypes.
Yeah. That makes sense. I think, yeah, that's tough. If there's not bleed or any sort of like secretish stuff to do, we're gonna have some struggles in the coming months.
Well, the coming month, because the good news is Dustborn is right around the corner. I'm sure we're going to do like 4 or 5 episodes for this format.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Should we chat about some sweepers, which we don't have that many of, thankfully. There's Wildfire Howl, which is a mini sweeper. I think both you and I gave this a sideboard grade because I was like, I can't imagine a red deck that wants this, but this is a 1 red for sorcery, deals 2 damage to each creature, and it has a gift option. You can gift a card, and if the gift was promised, instead the Howl deals 1 damage to any target and 2 damage to each creature. So it can pick off one larger thing. But a lot of the red decks, I think, are low to the ground, are aggressive. I just don't anticipate you running that main a lot of the time. We do also have just a classic sweeper, Starfall Invocation, at rare, 3 white for a sorcery. Destroy all creatures. It has the option to gift a card. If the gift was promised, return a creature card put into your graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control.
That card's absurd, right?
This is like Time Wipe 6.0. Like, Time Wipe was 2 white, blue, and you got to Wrath, but pick up one of your things. So save one of your things, but you still had to recast it.
It's like a 5-mana Dune Blast that's in 1 color.
Yeah.
What a card.
What a card.
We've got Season of Weaving. This is 4 blue for a mythic sorcery. This is one of the paw cards. So you get to choose up to 5 paws worth of modes. You may choose the same mode more than once. Single paw to draw a card. Double paw, choose an artifact or creature you control, create a token that's a copy of it. Triple paw, return each non-land, non-token permanent to its owner's hand. So some mass bounce there.
And then in black, we have Season of Loss, 3 black for a mythic sorcery, and another paw card. Choose up to 5 paw worth of modes. And so single paws, each player sacks a creature. So that's our sort of Wrath mode, is you can just sort of, unless some player has more than 5 creatures, which is possible, but you can at least choose that mode to just sort of get everything dead. And in a sense, if you have, if you got 3 creatures, your opponent has 2, get to choose that mode twice, just get rid of their stuff, keep your best creature. Then the other modes are draw a card for each creature you control that died this turn, and then each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard.
That card's also insane. You can go like triple paw, each player sacks 3 things, and then draw 3?
Mm-hmm.
That's like game over.
Mm-hmm.
Whew, what a card.
Yeah. Luckily, that's a mythic. Starfall Invocation being just rare, that's going to be one of the big feel bads of the format, I think.
Takes us on to fixing. So we now have some news in the fixing department, which is more than we had last week, which was 0, but still not tons of great news here. I don't know. I'm kind of optimistic about the amount of colorless fixing there is. So lands, we've got Uncharted Haven, which is the ETB tapped land, and you choose the color of mana that you want it to tap for when it ETBs. We've also got Hidden Grotto. That was the one we had seen last week, which is the ETB Surveil one. Taps for colorless, and then you can filter mana through it 1 and tap Hidden Grotto to add 1 mana of any color.
The artifacts are not my favorite. There's Fountain Port Bell, which is a single mana artifact, lets you search your library for a basic land card, put it on top after you shuffle, and then you can pay 1, sack the bell to draw a card. So it sort of effectively lets you find it and put it into your hand with some other, I guess, possible modes. There's 3 Tree Mascot, which is a 2 mana 2/1 changeling, lets you filter a mana once each turn. And then Patchwork Banner is a 3 mana rock. It's also an anthem for a creature type that you choose when it comes into play, and taps for a mana of any color.
It's more going to be used for the anthem of a creature type. That's more when you're going to want the card.
Right, because
if you're in on rabbits, pumping all your rabbits +1/+1 is going to be excellent.
And then you're not fix it. Like you're not like splashing in your green-white rabbits deck.
Right.
Yeah.
That takes us on to some colored fixing, which is green. And we've got Heaped Harvest as the first card. This is a very cool card. I like this card.
Yeah.
2 and a green for a common. It's an artifact food. When it enters and when you sacrifice it, you can search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. And it has the usual food ability to sack itself to gain 3 life. But if you potentially forage with this, you're getting a mana-free way to go get a second basic. That's pretty tight.
And then there's 3 Tree Root Weaver, 1 and a green, 1/3, taps for a mana of any color. Pretty classic 2 mana dork.
I like it.
Takes us on to Incidental Lifegain. There's food, whether in tokens or actual cards that are food. And it seems to be a big-ish part of the set since Black-White is a life gain deck, and there's a handful of repeatable ways to gain life, whether that's life link or triggers on attack, etc. But I expect Incidental Life Gain to play a part. Though, food tokens, it's a cost, right? You're investing mana to gain that life, and so it's not free. I mean, it's incidental in terms of, creatures or whatever, cards making food tokens or it being tacked on elsewhere, but it's not free in terms of the mana you have to invest, which brings us on to mana sinks. I just want to shout out that, one, we could probably just cut this as a segment because, when was the last time there weren't places to put mana, where you ran out of stuff to do with your mana in a limited format? But, there's just so much. There's food, there's class enchantments, right? Cycle of enchantments to be able to dump mana into to pump them up. There's offspring costs, so we've got a kicker variant. There's the village lands, and some of those are repeatable, as we talked about last week. And then that sort of handful of creature pump on common or uncommon creatures. And, we've got a rummager, a blinker, a way to draw cards, surveil one. No one's running out of stuff to do with their mana in limited these days.
All right, that takes us to the gradation differences. Ding, 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 ding. Take those gloves off, folks. First, we got to go over the grading scale, though. We use the classic limited resources grading scale, the gold standard for limited podcasts. And so that kicks us off with the A's, which are the bombs, the game winners, good in many situations, especially when you're behind. Some of the best cards in the set, bomb rares, and hyper-efficient removal spells. Cards like Guide of Souls, Carbomination, Amped Raptor, making a crack into the A range, and Writhing Chrysalis in the A's as well.
How do you feel? I snuck them in there.
I don't love Amped Raptor and Chrysalis in the A's.
I thought you might not.
Chrysalis probably. But anyway, that's not what this podcast is about.
If we go to the B's, apparently it is. I mean, some people were like, I would listen to an hour bonus episode of you guys arguing about the grading scale. I'm hoping that this time around, by just grading everything a C, we'll have eliminated many of the arguments from last Crash Course. So moving on, we get to the B's. Strong cards that pull you into a color or make you want to play that color. Reasons to be in a particular color or combination of colors, like Path of Annihilation, Depth Defiler, and Galvanic Discharge.
Your C's are your solid playables, the meat and potatoes of a limited deck, role player creatures, and normal removal spells. Cards like Serum Visionary, Mandibular Kite, and Wither and Bloom.
Your D's, these are the sometimes playable below average 22nd, 23rd type cards. Cards like Void Pouncer, Electrozoa, and Rosecott Knight.
Your F's are your unplayables, cards you should never put in your deck, or weird rares. Things like Power Balance, Charitable Levy, and Orim's Chant.
Boy, did Modern Horizons 3 just have a glut of those kinds of cards. We also have some augmentations or different kinds of grades we're going to give cards. First up is sideboard cards. Ben, you wouldn't know anything about this, but in best of 3, you get to you can play against a deck multiple times, and so you can switch out some cards. And so these are cards that don't make the main deck, but when you board them in, can be quite good. We don't get a lot of these, like Meltdown, Foul Strike, but like the sort of modal disenchant plummet kind of cards is shrinking the amount of sideboard cards.
I got savaged by Foul Strike the other day. I went all in on a Riddlegate Gargoyle with the enchantment that gives you +1/+1 for each creature you control. And I had a wide board, so like +6/+6, plus all of them had an Exalted counter on them. And I was ready to kill my opponent, and just the main deck Foul Strike in best of 1 savaged me.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Maybe Foul Strike isn't even a sideboard card.
Takes us on to the build around cards, which are cards that don't do much on their own, but when you build around them can be good to great. Modern Horizons 3 also full of the build around cards. I'm going to miss Modern Horizons 3. I know you're a hater, but that format was good. We've got stuff like Essence Reliquary, Phyrexian Ironworks, and Echoes of Eternity.
I love this. I love the sentence. I know you're a hater, but
You're wrong.
objectively, that
You're
format was good.
wrong.
I love
It was
it's
great.
really, that's very nice. It's really good. I appreciate it.
I
Synergy
value your
cards.
opinion, though.
We'll see about that. Synergy cards are cards that are not good enough to build around, but provide good synergy if they are in the right deck. Cards like Nesting Grounds, Arcbound Condor, and Infernal Captor.
Lastly, we've got diminishing returns cards, which are cards where the second copy is significantly worse than the first copy. Stuff like Dog Umbra, Siege Smash, or Gravedig.
Those are just, I couldn't really find any cards. Those are just cards where the first copy was sort of significantly worse for being in your deck. But there we have it. I almost deleted it because I don't think we gave any diminishing returns grades this time around. But
I gave one.
We'll keep it. Oh, you did. Okay, great. Well, let's get into these card grading differences. First up, white common, a pun. I just hate it because it's a pun. Crumb and Get It, single white for an instant, has gift of food. How do we read the gift cards? Do you read the gift like when it comes up as the bonus? I think you read what the card does and then tack on the gift part.
No.
No?
Just in order that it's on the card.
Oh, I think that's so confusing. Okay, I'm going to read it my way, actually. I asked your opinion, but I'm just going to read it my way. So Crumb and Get It is a single white instant. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn, and you can promise a food, and if the gift was promised, that creature also gains indestructible until end of turn. We got to really hold on to these cards because this is one of the few cards that I graded higher than you. I gave this a C, you gave this a D+. I mean,
that means you get to defend also.
Before
you defend, I will say I liked the way you interjected the gift of food in the middle. If the gift was promised and you gift of food, blah, 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 blah. That was nice. It was a nice touch.
That's the BFA in acting coming through there. Just, really understanding the text of the card. I think that single white +2/+2 is good, especially in a color, right? White and red care about Valiant, care about stuff getting targeted. And I think the variability of being able to protect the thing is definitely worth chucking a food for your opponent. To be able to go like, oh, this is also just single, it's Snakeskin Veil, right? If I want it to be. I mean, not quite because Indestructible isn't hexproof, but that's why I'm not giving this it's not a C+, it's not a B-, but I do think solid C for Crumb and Get It.
Solid C. That's tough for me to wrap my head around. I think the premise of bumping up combat tricks because Valiant exists, I don't think that's quite worth it. I think Valiant is more, if you were going to play combat tricks, you're going to play combat tricks anyway. And Valiant to me is more finding repeated ways to trigger the Valiant without having to spend a full card to do it.
This might be one where I should give it a diminishing returns grade. I would be shocked if you didn't want to include a Crumb and Get It in certainly any white-red deck.
Yeah, I'm into that. I'm in for the first copy is pretty good. I think that's why I gave it a D+. I mean, clearly we didn't meet and talk about the.
We didn't have the meeting. Who has time for that? Like I said, I just gave everything a C. I was hoping that would avail me of any disagreements, but nonetheless,
I'd buy that you actively want the first copy of this in a red-white deck.
All right.
Moving on to the white uncommons, we've got Builder's Talent, which is a class. It's 1 and a white. At level 1, when it enters, you create a 0/4 white wall creature token with Defender. Level 2 costs a white to level it up. And it says whenever one or more non-creature, non-land permanents you control enter, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. And level 3, you can pay 4 and a white to have whenever this class becomes level 3, return target non-creature, non-land permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. You gave us a D. I gave us a build around B-. This might be our biggest gap.
I started off giving this a build around grade, and then I thought to myself,
when and how and why are you building around this?
Well, I was like, so then it's like a build around D, which I, unlike you, think build around D is not a grade because that just like the premise there. I reject the premise of building around a card to get its ceiling up to a D. So yeah, I just don't think I like this card, and you are this reminds me of arguing about Birth of Meletus and Theros Beyond Death. You are predisposed to loving like 2 mana 0/4 plus a little something.
Like, for sure. Guilty as charged.
I just don't know what white deck wants this. And unless there's like a class deck or a white control deck that Builder's Talent is like the helm of, but that just doesn't seem likely to me.
I mean, I wish I could say I had a very cohesive argument for this card, but I don't. But sipping coffee for the audio folks right now. I do not have a cohesive argument for this, other than this gives you a lot. And I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, but I'm going to do something with it.
Can I ask, what are the non-creature, non-land permanents that are triggering level 2 for this for you?
Banishing Light. There's lots of like your carrot cake card that you love. I think there are
Food,
cards
right? They
that
don't have
will
to be, they can be tokens.
food.
Food will
I
trigger
think
this.
card does a ton. And the fact that level 2 is so cheap is nice. Like, imagine this is better than a 2 mana or a 3 mana 0/4 that had this ability. And you would maybe be trying to build around that. There's also cards that care about when +1/+1 counters are placed on things, which you also graded low. I think we're arguing about that later, potentially.
Oh, yeah, I definitely did. That's unplayable trash right there.
And level 3 is real. Like, let's say you're banishing like it's blown up, you bring it back. Let's say your cool aura. I don't know what it is, but I think, I don't have specific plans for this
You
yet.
really, you didn't do your
Just,
homework on this one.
I didn't do my homework, but that was what I thought when I graded it. I was like, huh, this is an awful lot. Like, again, I don't, maybe it's, this is getting worse the longer I go.
I just wish you had stopped at "this is awful," not "this is an awful lot." Just could have stopped there.
Wow. I don't know. I stand by it. The wheels are spinning when I see this card, and I think potential's there.
This is the perfect example of a card that you will never draft, and I will. But like, I stand by that. This is like probably for this format. This is honestly week 2, like trying to figure out what spice there is. Because one of the things I was thinking about when I saw this, I was like, oh, is there like a class deck? Because classes would trigger. The classes are non-enchantment, non-creature, non-lands. But the classes are, as evidenced by this card, I think, mostly bad.
Yeah, it's a little at odds with itself too. And 0/4 doesn't really want
exactly
+1 counters. I don't know. What can I say? I like the card.
All right. Moving on, we have Parting Gust. This is white for an instant. Exile target non-token creature, and you can promise a tapped fish. And if the gift wasn't promised, return that creature to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step. We chatted about this last week. I gave this a C+. You gave this a D+. I am probably too high on the modality here, right? So this is split Kasmina's Transmutation, two mana, exile a thing, they get a 1/1.
Which you're on a crusade about those cards being terrible.
I truly am, but it's a split of you can also flicker your own thing, and then it's a little bit bigger on the way back in. That is probably all not a very good card. So I think C+ is certainly too high.
I think you're hoping to never play Parting Gust, personally. I just don't. I think white also is tough to hold up.
I think you're right. I'm coming down to D+. See, I can admit when my evaluation is wrong, unlike some people.
No, I have no problem admitting when I'm wrong. I think that is yet to be shown about Builder's Talent. I cannot wait to tweet at you with a sweet Builder's Talent deck. All right, next up, we've got Dewdrop Cure. This is 2 and a white for an uncommon sorcery. It says, return up to 2 target creature cards, each with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If the gift was promised, which is gifting a card, instead, return up to 3 target creature cards, each with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. You give us a D. I gave us a Synergy C. We kind of talked about this last week, but I think this does enough in a mice deck. I think you're going to be, with mice specifically, like flooding the board, and then you're going to get it in situations where you're chump attacking to push damage. And then if you can follow that up with a Dewdrop Cure, I assume you're going to be able to do the finishing blow.
I just don't think you have room for this. Like, you have to have creatures in that deck. You have to have removal in that deck. You have to have ways to target your creatures in that deck. I just don't think you ever are putting this. Like, where does this you're just always cutting this. You're always going to be like, and then chat's going to say, just cut Dewdrop Cure. You're going to be like, yeah, you're right. And then it's on the sideboard.
Yeah, you're right. I'll come down to D.
Okay. Next, we have Mouse Trapper, 2 and a white for a 3/2 with Flash at uncommon, and it has Valiant. When it's targeted by a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, tap target creature an opponent controls. I gave this a C. You gave this a B-.
Yeah, I love this card. I think this card is pushed. Very aggressive.
Interesting.
Very, very flavorful. A 3 mana 3/2, normally not great stat line because it's going to trade with
Yeah.
2 drops, but I think you're going to be able to flash this in. Like maybe your opponent thinks they're racing and they can't. I just think the fact that this is unexpected makes it quite a bit better. And then you're going to be able to do it on offense and defense, right? Like you're going to be able to like maybe tap down their last blocker, crack into
Yeah.
them, and then if you have another instant speed way to trigger it or on your opponent's turn, you can also pseudo play defense with it. I think this card is a combat house, and you're going to be really controlling what happens in combat in terms of tempo of the game when Mousetrapper's on the battlefield.
I guess I just feel like I I don't know. You could be right. I just can't imagine this pulling me into white. Maybe I could go up to C plus, but I just don't like. I feel like I want to be, because you're going to have a sort of, if you're a Valiant deck, you're going to have the choke point, I think, is going to be on the ways to target creatures rather than the creatures that get bonuses from being targeted. And because like by nature, you're not running 12 ways to target creatures. You're running like 15 creatures and some ways to target them. And yes, there are some creatures that have activated abilities that you can repeat to target stuff. There's repeatable ways, right? With like, there's a cool short sword variant that just got previewed. That's a 2 mana equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 vigilance and reach, I think. But the equip cost is only 1. So you can do the Nadu thing, just like bink, 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 shuffle it among your creatures to get their first Valiant triggers. That, like, I could see it there, but if I've only got like the one spell, I don't know, I guess I have the choice, but I just feel like most of the time I'm gonna want, like, the creatures are getting buffed a lot of the time, and I feel like that is more valuable than having this like pretty poor body plus tap a thing down. But
But think about how oppressive Territorial Hammerskull is in an aggressive deck.
yeah, but this wishes it was even a cousin of Territorial Hammerskull.
Oh, this seems better than Territorial Hammerskull to me.
How is that possible when Territorial Hammerskull is from Ixalan? It's 2 and a white, 2/3. When it attacks, you tap a thing down. I just don't see how the card doing the thing on its own could ever be worse than Mousetrapper.
Sure, but Mousetrapper offers things that Territorial Hammerskull doesn't,
Correct.
which is flash, 3 power, it's pushing more damage, plus the first time you tap, it's unexpected, and then also offers the ability to do it on defense as well. I mean, they're not comparable cards in that way. I'm pretty excited about Mousetrapper, but the other thing I want to dive into that you said here, which is, I don't know if this pulls me into white. My view going into the format is that I want to be white. White looks outstanding
I
to me, and I love all
agree.
of the white color pairs. So any reason I can currently find to get into white, like that's my default going to the set. And so
Interesting.
pretty high on Mousetrapper as a result
All
of
right,
that as well.
I'll come up to C plus. I'm not quite on the B- land, but I think you win.
All right, that takes us on to blue. We've done a good job in the commons. We've eliminated a lot of gradation differences in the
When
commons.
you just call them all C's, it's just easy peasy.
All right, so first uncommon we've got here in blue is Plume-Creed Escort. This is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 flash flying bird at uncommon, and it says when it enters, target creature you control gains hexproof until end of turn. You gave us a B, I gave us a C plus.
Yeah, I mean, I think like 2 mana 2/1 flyer is a C plus in my mind. Like that's just really good evasive beater. And flash on this is nice. Like you're not ambushing stuff really, but just like being able to pass with mana up and potentially do multiple things, that's valuable. And when this saves a creature, like that's amazing. So I do think this is a really big pull into blue for me.
I like it. I think more often than not, you're going to be forced to run this out on turn 2 in your opening hand, in which case it is like the 2/1 flash flyer, but getting all the other stuff, like I have the same question, I guess, that you had about the Mousetrapper. Does this really pull me into blue like this as a card? Like it's a
Well,
very good card once
because
it's
one of
in
the
your
things
deck
that
and you're never cutting it.
right, that's one of the nice things is like Mousetrapper, it's going in red white, and like how good it is in other decks remains to be seen. I can't imagine, like, sure, I'm blue green frogs, Plume Creed Escort, get in. Like, what a great What a great thing to be able to flicker in that deck, Like,
Yeah, that's where it's best for sure.
well, I mean, it's also probably best in blue-white birds because it's a bird. Like, I just think there's no world where you're cutting this from a blue deck.
Yeah, all right, you've convinced me. I'm coming up to B-.
Next, we have Calamitous Tide. This is 4 blue for a sorcery. Return up to 2 target creatures to their owner's hand, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. I gave this a C, you gave this a B-. Now, these are cards I often underrate or I rate lowly, and sometimes that is correct and sometimes it is not. But the 6 mana bounce 2 things variants, I think, are generally clunky, right?
Kind of clunky, but this time you get to draw 2 cards and discard a card, and it's going to help you stay alive while you're drawing the 2 cards, similar to the blue draw 3 where you can lock something down. Like, if you can buy yourself breathing room to bounce, like, if you're ahead, this is game over. And if you're behind,
Correct.
this can buy you some breathing room to find an answer to the things that were problematic for you. Like, I think typically the problem with these cards is they're not good in every situation. I think the fact that this has draw 2, like, this is free. Bounce 2 things plus card selection. It replaces itself.
This is free. What a take.
It costs 6 mana, but I mean, you're not down a card and you're not really down tempo. You're up tempo. And even on cards,
you are up tempo. So here's something we sort of touched on during the MH3 crash course, which was sort of disparity in my head in terms of thinking about cards with when you draft them versus how they will play out. Are you really drafting this highly? Like, a B- says to me, like, you would first pick this. Are you ever first picking this? Like, no way.
I mean, similar to your disclaimer, I have a tendency to love this type of effect, like blue bounce 2 things. It's hard for me to imagine myself first picking this thing, but it does make me want to draft a blue deck. I just hard for me to imagine it being bad once you get to 6 mana. It's just a game warping effect.
Yeah, except sometimes, like, I don't know. Like,
compare this to something like a 3 and a blue, bounce a thing, draw a card, blink of an eye or whatever. And so those are usually instant speed. So it's a little more play there. But you like that for 4 mana, right?
I do.
This is that on steroids for only 2 more mana?
Only 2 more mana. It is a sorcery. Yeah, I could come up to C+. It's just so hard. Like, I'm just never picking this early. Like, you're just
probably too expensive. Yeah,
that's the thing. Is
maybe C plus is where it lands then.
All right, I could go to C+. I could go to C+.
I do think the effect is quite powerful, though.
Yeah, it is. I hate the that's the thing about it is when you describe like when you're behind, it buys you time. Like, that just feels so to me in the modern day era where like everything has an ETB. And so like, what are you really happy bouncing? Like, it like buys you time. And yes, it's not costing you a card. And I'm doing aggressive air quotes for the YouTube video, but like, it doesn't really. Like, you're card neutral and then your opponent just goes, cool, redeploy those threats. And you're like, now I'm dead the next turn. Like,
well, but it digs you towards answers too, presumably, in that scenario.
Yeah. I don't.
You don't sound convinced.
I'm not convinced. I'm sticking with C. I don't think this card's very good.
There we go.
What I should say is it's great. It's a C.
All right. Next up, we've got Daring Wave Rider. This is 4 blue for a 4/4 uncommon. When this enters, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with mana value 4 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell will be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. I give us a B. You give us a C+. This card is great. You hate 6 mana Flame Tongue Kavus. I don't understand what's going on. This card is amazing.
I do hate 6 mana Flame Tongue Kavus. So again, it's got like that. It can play out that way. This is a card you could first pick this.
Yes, this card is amazing.
There is a world where you're not first picking this ever because it costs 6.
No.
Yes.
This card is primo. Okay. Primo. I refuse to hear heresy against this card. It is outstanding.
Okay. I'm going to stick with C+, but I could be very wrong. And then maybe
this doesn't pull you into a Spells Matter deck? That's insane. When are you ever drafting Spells Matter, if not for something like this?
I don't know. I feel like I like the otter, make an otter token with flashback spell better than this in a Spells Matter deck.
No way. I'm like, kind of. They're different pieces of the puzzle, but like, this is so good.
Yeah. Okay.
This format looks like good, clean, limited Magic to me, and a card like this is going to impact the board and dome your opponents. Plus blink. Blue's got blink stuff going on. This is whenever you eat E2Bs, right? Not whenever you cast it.
Yeah.
This
Sorry,
card
no,
is
it's just when it enters. We just say
yeah.
enters.
Whenever this card enters, you're gonna be blinking this in a Frogs deck. This card is powerful.
Okay, great. I love it. It's a C+.
No.
Moving on to black, we do have some comments to talk about here. We didn't do great. Ravine Raider is first. Black for a 1/1 lizard rogue with menace. And you can pay 1 on a black to give it +1/+1 until end of turn. I gave this a C-. You gave this a synergy C+. Now, the caveat I have here is that much like you're like, I'm giving this white card a B- because I want to draft white. I don't want to draft red black in this format. I don't think this deck looks good. And so, like, Ravine Raider, yeah, it's a synergy piece for that deck. It looks like a bad synergy piece for a bad deck in my mind.
I disagree on that part. I don't think it's a bad synergy piece. I think when your opponent goes turn 1 Ravine Raider, your reaction is going to be, well, crap. Like, because you know it's going to deal you 3 to 4 damage over the course of the next couple turns, and they're going to be triggering all their life loss stuff. Threat of activation, super real on this. I think this card is going to be very scary on turn 1.
Threat of activation is not super real on this. In what scenario can you double block this? And it pumping matters.
I mean, to trade with one of your things.
Okay, that's a 2-for-1. Plus, you had to dump mana into it.
Yeah, sure, but it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's not sequential. It like keeps adding up. It's exponential, like the amount of pressure it's putting on your blockers, because it's attacking in, and then it plus your 2-drop is attacking in. It plus your 2-drop plus your 3-drop is attacking in. Like this coming down on turn 1 is going to make it so that your opponent always pushes damage in a deck that wants to always push damage.
I hear everything you're saying. I just don't. Do you think that deck looks good?
No, but,
right? Like, what are the payoffs for like dealing your opponent damage other than getting them to 0?
I don't. Why am I being punished for this deck looking bad? I don't understand. Like, if the deck is going to do anything, Ravine Raider is going to be a very important part of the deck doing things.
Okay, I agree with that. I just don't think it's going to do anything. So I'm going to stick with C-, and that's that.
Okay, I'm going to stick with Synergy C+. I think Ravine Raider is a card. Next up, we have Psychic Horror.
No notes.
It was a little tentative.
Perfect pronunciation.
We've got 2 and a black for a sorcery. Target opponent discards 2 cards. Then if you control a rat, surveil 2.
Yeah, I gave this a C. You gave this a synergy D+, and I should be giving this a synergy C because like blue black is really the only deck that's going to want this. Maybe black green because it plus surveil 2 gives you a way to forage. I do think like in the past few years, like Mind Rot plus, as long as it's 4/3 mana, has been pretty good.
But it's generally been Mind Rot plus affect the board. This is Mind Rot plus get you like a third of the way to the threshold. It's not.
It's half because this plus this
3/7. 3/7.
Yeah, 3/7.
It's not half.
It's very close to 3.57, which is half.
2 psychic horals.
2 psychic horals. Yeah, that's true. Is not give you threshold.
Not get you to threshold. This card looks terrible to me. You're never playing this card.
No, I think I am going to play this card. I think
just
I'm going to play
it. Me?
Yeah, I'm just to spite you. Just so I can send you a deck. Be like, went 0-3 with this. Ben, taste it. Cast this card multiple times.
Blue black does not look great, and I cannot imagine your blue black deck hinging on Psychic Horror.
Yeah, I think that's a fair take. You're probably closer to right, but I'm going to stick with Synergy C.
Next, we've got Scales of Shale. This is 2 and a black for an instant at common. Costs 1 less to cast for each lizard you control. Target creature gets +2/+0 and gains a lifelink and indestructible until end of turn. You give us a D+. I give us a Synergy C+. I think this is going to be a similar conversation to Ravine Raider, but I think if red-black is a deck, I think Scales of Shale, again, is going to be a card you can get late. Nobody else will want this card.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it looks really good because theoretically, if you've built your red-black deck correctly and it's playing out right, you are forcing your opponent into situations where they have to block or try to race you. And this just ruins both of those things. Like your opponent should theoretically be tapped out. He plays for single black, +2/+0, lifelink, indestructible, big life swing. Your creature lives. Like imagine them trying to go to double block your Ravine Raider and you play this plus pump it once and it trades for their 2/2 drops or whatever. That's probably why you graded it low, but I think Scales of Shale has potential if red black has potential.
Yeah, and like the casting cost here, like this is you're only playing this in red black, and so like and you're only casting it when you have a creature in play, which is ostensibly is a lizard. Though, so at its base, this really costs 2, but ideally it really costs 1. You're probably right. Like if I'm more sold on if red black is a deck. I guess I could see Ravine Raider too, but I see it. Synergy C+ is fine for this card. It's interesting to me that you graded this card Synergy C+ and gave the single white +2/+2 gift of food indestructible trick a D or whatever. Like it's interesting to me that those are both in theory 1-mana combat tricks. The white one has way less setup and is I think just better, but you're way higher on this than the white one. I think that's interesting. I don't know what's going on there.
I love jumping through hoops. That's what it says about me.
You love the hoops.
Why would you not want to do the work to make things great?
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, I think in my brain, here's what I would say. The white one, I don't see as being an essential or an irreplaceable part of white decks. And I think Scales of Shale is going to be an essential, irreplaceable part of the red-black decks. Like if it's going to work, I see Scales of Shale being awesome there. And I don't ever feel like the white card is going to be awesome.
Yeah, that's fair.
It takes us on to the uncommons, where our first one up is Ruthless Negotiation. It's black for an uncommon at sorcery. Target opponent exiles a card from their hand. If the spell was cast from a graveyard, you draw a card. And it's got flashback for 4 and a black. You give us a C+, I give us a Synergy D+. Talk to me about this card.
Well, I thought we left last week thinking this card was good.
I mean, not good. You'll just put it in a deck that's got some self-mill.
But that's like half the black decks?
Yeah, it's blue,
black and black green.
And black, sure. But you should, like, maybe that's more, maybe it's not a C+. You're getting this like on the wheel 11th pick or whatever, and maybe again, it's going to make your pick.
I know this is a broader conversation or a longer conversation, but that's like where the grading scale is lacking. Because like this is now I'm grading the card on how I feel like it's going to play out in a deck, and you're grading it on where you think you're going to pick it. And so, like,
yes.
Those are two separate ways to think about cards, you know?
But again, I don't think this is going to play out like a C+. Like, to me, that's something that would have a significant impact on the game. This is like putting a free mana sink in your deck or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're right. You're right.
It's not having a large effect on the game.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
You're just getting a little bit of value at the cost of putting a card in your deck that you don't really want to draw.
I think that's true. Yeah. Speaking of a little bit of value, I do like this next card, I think. Bandit's Tale is 1 and a black for a class enchantment. When it enters, each opponent discards 2 cards unless they discard a non-land card. Level 2, it costs black mana. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if that player has 1 or fewer cards in hand, they lose 2 life. And 3 and a black, level 3, at the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card for each opponent who has 1 or fewer cards in hand. I gave this a C+, you gave this a D. Oh no. A D?
A D. It's lower than a C.
So 2 mana, you get a spell out of their hand. They discard a spell.
You love making people discard cards and not affecting the board.
Well, it's so good because then they can't play out all their cards. Or they're losing life and I'm drawing cards.
Losing life and killing you while you've spent mana to level up your bandit's talent to not affect the board.
Yeah. I don't know. There's something here.
I agree. My curiosity was piqued about this card, and I was like, "Is this good?" And then finally, I was like, "This can't be that good."
It probably
you would have to
can't
surround
be
it.
that good.
I think it's got potential if you're surrounding it with cards like Psychic Coral,
Coral, and Ruthless Negotiation. There's a discard deck. I'm drafting it. I'm doing it. You can't stop me.
I can't stop you. I can choose to tell our listeners that these cards are bad and not draft them myself.
That's fair.
I think this card's really bad.
Really bad? Oh man. It's not a C plus. It's like it's like a
It's really bad.
it's a build around D. All right.
There we go.
It's
You
a
love
build
it.
around D. That's fine.
You're higher than me on a lot of these cards. This is interesting. Next up,
Yeah.
we've got Sinister Monolith. 3 and a black for an uncommon artifact. At the beginning of combat on your turn, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. It's got the ability tap, pay 2 life, sacrifice it to draw 2 cards, activate that part only as a sorcery. You give us a B minus. I give us a build around C.
Yeah, I think that this one I feel is like one I'm kind of like whatever making a hot take about, I guess. But so like it's ill-gotten inheritance. Like yes, it has the same 3 and a black text. It doesn't have the like lava axe part, right, where you could sack it to chunk them for 4. But in half the black decks, and one that I'm very excited about in black white, this being a repeatable way to gain life on your turn in black white, I think is really good. And black red, this is guaranteed they lose life on your turn. So it's triggering that stuff. And then so it being like a pretty relevant player, plus like we've seen that this kind of effect. I mean, yeah, there was like one time where it was printed with just this, and that wasn't a real card, but like this is going to enable a lot of stuff. So I don't know. I'm taking a stand. I'm less excited about pay 2 life, draw 2 cards as a sorcery, but you can do it in a pinch, I guess.
I've got 2 wolves inside of me, Ethan.
Mm-hmm.
One wolf says this card is not very good and that you should probably not pick it highly and put it in your deck. The other wolf inside of me wants to play this in black white with builder's talent, get some drains and gains, sack it, put it in the yard, get 2 life, get it back with builder's talent, sack it again, get 2 more cards, just popping off. But I think all told, it is hard for me to picture a world where Sinister Monolith is a key part of any deck. Like, I could see it being playable in black white, but there's so many other more mana efficient ways that are attached to bodies in black white where you get to change your life total that I don't think you need to rely on a card that is this slow and clunky.
I think you're more right than not, but I'm like I said, this is one of my few takes, so I'm staking a claim.
I love it. Next up, we've got red commons. 1 common to talk about here. We've got Kindle Spark Duo, 2 in a red for a common lizard. It's a 1/3, taps to deal 1 damage to target opponent, and says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, untap Kindle Spark Duo. You give us a C minus. I give us a synergy C plus. I like this little lizard. I love the effect of pinging when you do a non-creature spell and then untapping, like chaining those non-creature spells together. This is presumably going to be playable in red black. I'm more excited about it in blue red, honestly, than I am in red black. It's a little tough as a 3 mana 1/3, like for the mana cost and the body. Those cards are generally better when they're 2 mana 0/4s or 2 mana 0/3s or whatever. It's not coming down until turn 3 is pretty slow. So in my heart of hearts, do I really think this is going to get there? I don't know, but I hope that it does, and I will be trying it out as such.
Yeah, you made all my arguments for me, but my main one is that, and we argued about, I don't remember, I think it was a 3 mana 0/5 in Wilds of Eldraine. We argued about that version, and the only reason that one was good was because Curiosity was in the bonus sheet, and you got to draw
the
cards
catapult.
off
Yeah.
pings. But and we argued about that card. You thought that card was going to be great, and the only time you ever played it was when you had Curiosity in a blue-red deck. And
is Curiosity in the format? Can I argue with you about Curiosity being great?
It's not, and you can't because it's not. I think Kindle Spark Duo suffers from the same thing. This might as well be like you're never wanting to engage with this in combat, even if your opponent like attacks with a 2/2, or you're like, oh, this is my engine. Do I really block with it? Like, this card is bad.
I agree. You're not picking it highly. Maybe I'll play it in blue red, but it's not great. I'll come down to C minus with you.
Moving on to the uncommons, we have Blooming Blast. 1 in a red for an instant, deals 2 damage to target creature, and you can gift a treasure, and if it was promised, Blooming Blast also deals 3 damage to that creature's controller. I gave this a C minus. You gave this a C plus.
Yeah,
Buddy.
I like this card quite a bit.
No,
2 mana, 2 damage.
No,
kill
you
something.
don't. No, you don't like this card. You do not. This cannot.
I don't?
No, you don't.
This is one where the gift is going to reward understanding of the game state and how much you push damage. I mean, 2 mana for 2 damage is not ideal, but it's not nothing.
No, I didn't.
Kills
I don't think
like half the creatures in the format or something, and the option of Searing Blaze your opponent is pretty strong. You're never doing it early in the game, But
Right.
imagine, like, this is a playable removal spell that then in a deck that's going to want reach, you're going to be able to dome your opponent for 3, potentially 6.
It's really like 2 mana deal 2 is not good. That is not a good spell. Full stop. The only time you are gifting a treasure to your opponent is when the 3 damage kills them. Or
No.
effectively, like you're killing them in the turn cycle or whatever. Or it's turn 8 where deal 2 mana deal 2 doesn't really matter. Like, I don't think this card is good. This card is worse than the common 2 mana deal 3, the common 3 mana deal 4. It's
I agree
worse.
with those
It's
two
worse than
statements.
the 2 mana deal 1 draw card. This card is not good. You will never sell me on.
I agree with all of those statements, except this card is not good. This card's
I,
playable. C minus, sure, but
C
C plus is
minus.
high.
C plus is too high.
Yeah, C minus. C plus
Yeah.
is too high.
Okay.
I agree. You're right. The grade is right.
Those were the words I was waiting for. You're right. I was waiting for those beautiful words.
All right, next up we've got Hoarder's Overflow. This is 1 red for an uncommon
First in a
enchantment.
series of Ethan is not afraid to give cards Fs, and Ben is.
No, whoa. Yeah. Or Ethan is not an optimist, and Ben sees the potential in all cards.
Yeah, it's true. Everyone is a beautiful snowflake.
This is an uncommon enchantment for 1 and a red. When a Hoarder's Overflow enters, and whenever you expend 4, put a stash counter on it. You can pay 1 and a red to sacrifice it to discard your hand, then draw cards equal to the number of stash counters on Hoarder's Overflow. You give us an F, I give us a D. This card is playable. It's not ideal taking turn 2 off, but maybe Ethan's just grinning as I talk.
I just know you're going to make my argument for me, so I'm just letting you talk. It's not ideal to take turn 2 off. Check. Correct.
On turn 4, you can play this plus a 2-drop and still get the expend 4. So you play this and then you play your 2-drop, immediately put a stash counter on it. And then presumably every turn after that for the rest of the game, you will be expending 4. You should be spending your mana every turn. And then when you're out of things to do, when you're out of things to do, you sacrifice Hoarder's Overflow and gas up to keep expending 4, baby. What's not to like?
You tell me what's not to like, because it seems like you like it an awful lot more than a D.
Am I ever playing Hoarder's Overflow? Probably not.
There we go. That's why it's an F. This card's terrible. You have described the ideal perfect scenario, and that sounds bad to me. You're like, on turn 4, I only play a 2-drop and this. Then I tap out every turn for the rest of the game until my hand is empty, and somehow I haven't won by then, so I get to draw 3. Like, just play a draw 3 in your deck that just always draws 3. What happens when you don't have it there and you top deck it? This card's atrocious.
All right, this card's an F. Don't put it in your deck.
Okay, thank you. Harnesser of Storms is next. 2 and a red for a 1/4 Otter Wizard. Whenever you cast a non-creature or Otter spell, you may exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card. This ability triggers only once each turn. I gave this a C. You gave this a B-.
This card's good. Yeah, I like this card. You're going to be able to double dip. I mean, doing it on your opponent's turn is not going to be particularly relevant because it'll be tough to play that card that turn.
I just feel like this is like, I don't know, it's fine. It's like a sort of perfect storm of where you're getting the thing from this, right? You're like casting something cheap and revealing something cheap, casting something cheap, revealing a land, playing that land. Or it's late in the game and maybe you get to like cast something medium expensive, reveal something medium expensive. I just think throughout the course of the game, this isn't really going to net you. Maybe if your deck is just like
this is going to net you
ground.
Stuff. Your deck should be, right? If you're building a blue-red spells deck, right, you're going to be running the +1/+0 cycling card. You're going to be running cheap removal.
Pound for pound in the blue-red deck.
Yes.
Do you want this or do you want the Spellgorger weird common that grows when you cast spells? This
10 out of 10 times. Yeah, because the deck doesn't have to be tempo aggro. It can operate as a control deck too. Think about in MH3 how terrified you felt when your opponent played the 7/5 reach and is cracking lands just digging for creatures. You're like, praying they don't hit creatures. And I think your blue-red decks are going to be built such that you will often be able to play the card because your cantrips are going to be so cheap.
Yeah.
This card is good. I feel pretty strongly that this card is good.
I can come up to C+. I'll come up to C+.
You're just never drafting blue-red. It's okay. That'll leave more cards for me.
Certainly not if I'm in a pod with you.
Lastly, in red, uncommons, we've got Brambleguard, Captain, 3 in a red for a 2/3, uncommon, Mouse Soldier. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is Brambleguard Captain's power. You give us a C-, I give us a C+.
Yeah, I'm just not that excited about this card. I don't think you can sell me on it. 4 mana 2/3 is.
I don't even get a chance to argue my case.
I just don't think you can. Go for it. Let's see.
I think this is going to be only a red-white card that maybe you will be able to get late, but I think Battle Rattle Shaman in a red-white deck that cares about Valiant and is going to presumably have small creatures that are going to get blanked as the game goes on, the ability to then turn your 2/1 mouse into a 4/1 mouse that has to trade with something real, that's good. And it's going to happen the turn this comes down while triggering Valiant for your team. This is synergy plus a way to push damage. I like Brambleguard Captain quite a bit.
Yeah, but like what you're saying is like you're trading one small body for another small body. You're like, it's turning your irrelevant creature into a relevant creature, but this as itself is an irrelevant creature. Like a 4 mana 2/3 is not good. So like the fact that it bumps up your 2, and yes, I know it happens the turn it comes into play. Yes, it triggers Valiant. I just think there's better stuff out there to do this. I don't know. I'm just not sold on these really like a very understated body. I think even with all the synergy doesn't get there for me.
That's fair. I think it does.
Yeah. Takes us on to green. First up, we do have some more comments here. You jinxed us. You said we're doing good on commons. I mean, we're not doing so good on commons. We've got Sunshower Druid, single green for an 0/2 frog druid. When it enters, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and you gain a life. I gave this a C-. You gave this a synergy C+.
This is going to be bread and butter for the frog deck. I think like as something to blink, to put counters on something. It's got some overlap with the black cards that maybe care about your life total changing. Could see this like getting there in an Abzan deck if there's some bleed going on like that. I like Sunshower. Maybe C+ is aggressive, but I think this card has a home.
Yeah, I think it feels like we're saying similar things with different grades, maybe. Like, I don't think this is unplayable or replaceable, right? I didn't give it a D or a D+, but I don't think this is a prior. Like, this feels like in the level of role players, like cards I'm like looking to slot in decks, this feels like at the bottom of that grouping to me. Like, I don't think I'm like, oh heck yes, Sunshower Druid, that's what I'm blinking in my deck. I don't think that's what I care about. Like, I'll do it, I'll play it, but I don't think I'm like, that's the thing. Like, ostensibly, this is like the lowest common denominator of things to blink. Like, if you have anything else worth blinking on the battlefield, it's going to be better than the Druid.
Yeah, but I think the Frogs deck also wants to like clog the board so that you have the time to win the game. Like the Frogs deck, it looks like it's going to be about grinding the game to a halt and then blinking some stuff with the uncommon until you blink your opponent into submission, to me. And I think this could be a big part of that, like building a creature up into a threat that's large enough to do the thing.
Yeah, it just seems really slow to me.
That's fair.
Yeah, don't love it. I'd like your take on this next card, and I like this card. Heaped Harvest, we talked about this, 2 and a green for a food. When it enters and when you sack it, you can search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. And because it's a food, you can pay 2 taps, sack it to gain 3 life. I gave this a C. You gave this a build around B-. Talk to me about building around this.
I just like this card, and maybe it's just because it's a unique card or a unique type of effect. But if you maximize this is 3 mana, search up a basic, put it onto the battlefield, search up another basic, put it onto the battlefield. Like, so if you can play this and sack at the turn that you play it, you're getting 2 tapped lands, ET being, it's also got the ability to sack itself to like gain you life, because part of the drawback of sacking 2 lands, like if there's a way to do something cool in the format, it is going to be around green decks and Heaped Harvest. I feel pretty strongly about that.
I agree with that.
This card just oozes potential to me, especially if you're playing it, foraging it away, because then presumably you're getting another card's worth of value out of it because it's a food also for your forage stuff. I really like Heaped Harvest.
Yeah, I like that take. I can go up to C plus for this or whatever. Or it just like, I agree with you. If there's anything cool to be done, if there's any multicolor soup, and it could even be just like base green 5-color with heaped harvest because of double search up, like it's got real like gift of paradise vibes to me in that sense of just like 3 heaped harvests in your deck and you can just do whatever you want.
Get some builder's talent into heaped harvest. Curve
Stop.
outs going. Build the feast, and they will come eat, baby.
I can
Build it, and they
see
will come.
I can see the differences of the reflection of your screen on your face when you're tabbing away to remind yourself of the name of builder's talent, and it's I see what you're doing. I see what's happening.
Guilty. I just want to give the listeners accurate naming information, put out the highest quality podcast as possible.
I appreciate it.
Next up, we've got one of the aforementioned Ben is afraid to give an F grades, except this one I'm not giving an F to. So this is Stocking the Pantry. It's green for an uncommon enchantment. Whenever you put 1 or more +1/+1 counters on a creature you control, put a supply counter on Stocking the Pantry. And it has the ability to remove a supply counter from Stocking the Pantry to draw a card. You give us an F. I give us a build around D.
A build around D is Ben for F.
No, I think there are enough ways to put. That was my initial question. There are enough ways to put +1/+1 counters on things to turn this into a card. And I was not convinced of that initially. The more I've looked at the format, I think Stocking the Pantry is real. Is it good? No, but you'll definitely be able to build a Stocking the Pantry deck if you want to. This also goes great with Builder's Talent.
You can't even say it without laughing because it's such an insane thing to say. Yeah, look, I don't know what to tell you. Like, at what threshold are you happy about the amount of work you've put in for the amount of cards you're going to draw for 2 mana each?
It's a really rough way to frame a question.
Mm-hmm.
I think the number would be 3 to 4, but I really don't like you framing it as paying two mana for each card that you draw.
I mean, you're paying 3 mana for the first card because this costs 1 up front, but we can sort of put that in the wash.
But you're gonna have your O4 to block with while you draw
this card is truly abysmal and is the second F of the crash course here. Next up, we've got a card that I'm too high on, but still I think you're not high enough on it. This is Bushy Bodyguard. 1 and a green for a 2/1 squirrel warrior with Offspring 2, and when this creature enters, you may forage. If you do, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Now, I do need to change I need to put a build around here because I gave this just a B+. I need to give this a build around B+. Though honestly, it might be like build around A- territory because I think the ceiling of this card is absolutely insane. 4 mana for a 4/3 and a 3/3 is incredible. And green has the tools to fuel double forage at common by turn 4. Like just cash grab will do it for you, honestly. And I think like that's just insane. Like the ceiling of this card is insane. And the floor is poopy doopy, 2 mana, 2/1. But I'm just basically thinking of like 2 mana, 2/1 is the fail case dumpster floor of this. And in my head, this is going in my 4-drop slot. And that's where I'm planning to play it.
Yeah, when I graded this, I was like, ooh, I kind of like this card. I think this is going to be a hot take. And then I unhit the grades and you just like hot taked me out of the room with the B+. And I was like, oh, this card just must be good if Ethan also likes it. I agree. I see a high ceiling on this card. I'm a little hesitant to be quite as high as you are because for it to really be truly insane, it has to be coming down on turn 4 also. Like,
and it's got to be good in like
a 4/3 and a 3/3 is much less impressive on turn 6 or turn 7. Whatever, still good,
still really good,
still good, but not game warping. And it's going to be tough to double spell past 4 mana on those turns. This is closer to like what was the card you hated? The Rictus Robber, the 4/3 plus the 2/2 that had the thing. Like this is kind of close to that in terms of setup cost and payoff, and that card was good, not great.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly see the potential here. Builder on A- or builder on B+ seems aggressive to me, but I do like that we both like this card, and I think there's clearly potential there.
I agree. Yeah.
Lastly, here in the green uncommons, we've got Brambleguard Veteran. This is 1 GG because it's going to be good game when you cast this card. For a 3/4 uncommon Raccoon Warrior, whenever you expend 4 raccoons you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn. You give us a C. I give us a B minus. I love Brambleguard Veteran. Did you miss that this pumps itself?
I didn't miss that it pumped itself. No.
This is going to be attacking as a 4/5 vigilance on turn 4 when you curve out with it, plus pumping your 2-drop. This is going to hit hard.
Yeah, it does hit hard. I guess I could see build around B minus.
It's just a stat monster.
I'm just not excited about this card, but maybe I need to get my head in the game in terms of the game is just stats.
Like, well, that's kind of what I'm thinking about the format, but like, imagine your turn 3 Mind Rot, and my turn 3 is Brambleguard Veteran.
Okay, well, I'm not playing Mind Rot on turn 3, so just relax, but thank you very much. I'll go build around B minus. Because it's not, like, I guess you're just playing it in any green deck?
I think you're playing it in any green deck. Yeah.
But you're not picking it as a B minus in any green deck. You're not picking it. Maybe you are.
I think it's a good card.
It's just good.
I think it's just a good card.
All right. You're kind of selling me. I'll go B minus. That's fine. It takes us on to, we have no disagreements in the multicolor section because everything's a C. Moving on to the artifacts. Fountain Port Bell. We talked about this. 1 mana artifact searches up a basic land, puts it on top, and you can pay 1, sack the bell to draw a card. I gave this a D. You gave this a C. What am I missing?
Builder's Talent, baby.
Click tab, Builder's Talent. Okay. So the D stands for me then, I think.
No, I think this is a colorless way to fix, and I think this is a fine way to fix at colorless.
Two mana to draw the basic is a fine way to fix.
Yeah.
Ooh,
environmental whatever was the environmental sciences.
How dare you? How dare you invoke environmental sciences as a free card that you just drew when you needed it to Fountain Port Bell? I think this card is like a necessary evil, and it's pretty, evil.
There's gonna it depends on how much you want to splash. The other thing that this does, which is not nothing, is in the Sultai Soupy decks, gets you a card towards Threshold.
Or a third of a forage.
Yeah, that's something.
Seems like something that I don't want, personally.
Yeah, that's fair. D+ maybe.
All right. Heirloom Epic is next. What's going on there?
This is 1 mana for an uncommon artifact. It has the ability 4 tap to draw a card. For each mana and this ability's activation cost, you may tap an untapped creature you control rather than pay that mana. Activate it only as a sorcery. You give us an F. I give us a D.
Chapter 3.
Chapter 3 of
the story of the saga of Ben's afraid to give cards Fs.
This card does something. You can.
What's so funny about this is you're put in this position where you have to argue positively a card that you clearly don't like.
It's horrible. Yeah, I'm not loving it, but this does something. In a Rabbit's deck, you're going to be able to go wide. You play the multicolored uncommon. You've got 3 bodies. You tap your 2 1/1s, and then all of a sudden, this is 2 tap draw a card. On a stable board, this wins the game.
I just don't think you're wanting to. I think it's like the best versions of those decks don't want to play this card.
Sure, that's fair, but this is similar to the tome from like DMU that you could tap for each
domain not good?
Yeah, it was not good, but sometimes you played it and sometimes it was great. And when it was great, it was great. I think Heirloom Epic is going to have decks or spots where it's outstanding. I don't think it'll be often, like once, twice a format, but I think there'll be some play to Heirloom Epic. Of the 3 cards that you've given Fs to, this is the one I believe in the most.
And in the exciting conclusion to our saga, we have Chapter 4, Star-Forged Sword. 4 mana for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +3/+3 and loses flying. There's an equip cost of 3, but when the sword enters, you can gift a tapped fish, and if you do, you get to auto-equip. Attach it to target creature you control. I did give this an F. You gave this a D.
I also believe in this one. Less than Heirloom Epic, but more than the other 2.
Okay.
The fact that the auto equip is possible on this makes this a real card, I think. Especially if you're putting it on a trampler or something like that. It also costs the magic 4 mana to trigger expend. Like, you're going to put this on your trampler, you're going to hit hard, they're going to have a tapped fish. They kill your thing late in the game, you're going to be able to pay the equip cost of 3. Like, this makes stuff huge.
This does make stuff huge. Yeah, does make stuff huge. Look, of the four, this is the only one I feel like I could give a little wiggle room to and come up to a D.
Yes, we got him.
Maybe that's argument fatigue. I can't tell.
we wore him down. We got him, folks.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, +3/+3 is huge. You're kind of selling me in maybe this is for the expend decks specifically, because those are going to be the combo of wanting the 4 mana to be played, and in red and green you're going to have tramples. But even on because the lose flying thing, I was like, even you could put it on in your blue white birds deck. No, not really. So
Not really there. Yeah.
but yeah, red green, I could see it. All right, D sounds good.
Red white also. It's going to turn your mice into super swole mice.
That I'm less excited
While triggering
about.
Valiant?
I'm less excited. I just think like you have a premium of the amount of 4 mana plays you want in your red white deck.
Sure.
All right. We did it. We made it through another crash course arguing through card grading differences. And I think everything was a C.
I don't think so.
Everything was a C. All right. How do you want, now that we've got this new format for our top cards to talk about, what do you want to do first?
Let's do the uncommons first.
Okay. So I'm going to lead things off with my white uncommons. First up, I've got Drift Gloom Coyote. 3 white for a 3/4. When it ETBs, exile target creature an opponent controls until Drift Gloom Coyote leaves the battlefield. If the creature had power 2 or less, you put a counter on the Coyote. My number 2 is Bright Blade Stoat, 1 and a white 2/2 first strike lifelink. And my number 3 is Flowerfoot Swordmaster, white for a 1/2 with Offspring 2. And it has Valiant. Whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, mice you control get +1/+0 until end of turn.
Your number 1 and your number 3 did not make my list.
Ooh.
So I had Bright Blade Stoat at number 1. That card is just an absolute house. Stats machine. Very efficient. Number 2, I have Harvestrite Host. This is 2 and a white for an uncommon 3/3 rabbit. And whenever it or another rabbit you control enters, target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And then you draw a card if this is the second time this ability is resolved this turn. One of the reasons I like this card is it's got some bleed, right? This is also going to be insane in like a rabbit's mouse hybrid deck in white. Like, this is just an excellent white card, and I think white is one of the best colors as far as like also has synergistic bleed within. Like, you can start white and you don't have to figure out what tribe you're in, but you're also going to be able to mash cards of multiple tribes together to make them work cohesively. I think in white, the best of all the colors.
I think it's going to feel very similar to Jeskai in MH3, where like, or red white specifically in MH3, where like you can like you're saying, start white, and you could end up white green rabbits, white red valiant mice, white black Lifegain. You could just end up white base aggro.
Bro, that's what I think. Yeah,
and like, you know, your 10-7 split and your support from whatever your secondary color is doesn't care as much about being streamlined as it does about stats and beating down.
Yeah. And in third place, I put my money where my mouth is. I've got the Mouse Trapper, 2 and a white for 3/2 flash, and Valiant, tap something down.
Love it. What's going on in blue?
Number 1 slot, I've got Mind Whisker, 2 and a blue for a 3/2 uncommon rat. At the beginning of your upkeep, Surveil 1. And then if you hit Threshold, creatures your opponents control get -1/-0. That is an insane line of text. This is going to help you get there. It works with itself. It's like a very powerful card.
I'm shocked, but don't you think blue-black is going to be a bad deck?
I don't think you have to be blue-black for that. I think that's just a great Magic the Gathering card.
Okay, love it. I like it a lot too.
It's just a good Magic the Gathering card. You are never cutting that from a blue deck, and if you have it, you're running like 2 to 3 dive downs.
Yeah.
Because that card is going to be a removal magnet. Second place, I've got Eddie Merc Crab. This is 5 blue for an uncommon 5/5 elemental crab with flash. Costs 1 less to cast for each instant sorcery in your graveyard. ETB's tapped if it's not your turn, and when it ETBs, you tap up to 2 target creatures. I think the turn you cast that, you are largely winning the game most of the time, and it seems like a great build around for the blue-red spells deck. And in third place, I've got Splash Lasher, 3 and a blue for a 3/3. When it enters, tap up to 1 target creature and put a stun counter on it, and it's got Offspring, 1 and a blue.
I mean, I don't know what this says about blue, because
blue's uncommons are juiced because we have no overlap.
We have no overlaps, right? So my number 1 is the bird, Plume-Creed Escort, 1 in a blue, 2/1 flash flyer. ETBs give something hexproof until end of turn. Number 2, I have Night Fisher, 3 blue for a 4/5 flyer. Whenever another non-token bird you control enters, you make a 1/1 blue fish creature token. And number 3, Otterball Antics. 1 and a blue sorcery. Make a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess. And if it's cast from anywhere other than your hand, put a counter on that creature, and it has flashback for 3 and a blue.
Yeah, love it. Moving on to the black uncommons. Number 1, I'm assuming we both have the same one here. Thought Stalker Warlock. It's 2 and a black for a 2/2 uncommon lizard with menace. When it enters, you choose target opponent. If they lost life this turn, they reveal your hand and you choose a non-land card from it, and they discard that card. Otherwise, if you don't meet those requirements, they just discard a card. No downside here. This card is nuts if you turn it on, especially on the play.
Yes, card is bonkers. Probably best uncommon in the set. I don't know. I also have it as number 1.
Number 2, I've got Wix Patrol, 4 black for a 5/3 uncommon. ETBs mill 3 cards. When you do, target creature an opponent controls gets -X until end of turn, where X is the greatest mana value among cards in your graveyard. I take it back. I think I do like blue-black.
Okay.
I'm changing my mind. I think I'm in on blue-black.
I think I kind of am too, but I'm not sure. It also kind of looks like it's like jumping through hoops to make stuff the same rate that other stuff is in the set. That doesn't take any work.
Yeah. I think it's got a higher ceiling than some of those decks, though.
Sure.
In the number 3 slot, I've got Feed the Cycle. This is 1 and a black for an instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, forage or pay black, and you can destroy target creature or planeswalker. Weren't we supposed to argue about that card? I was all ready to take you down on that one.
I just bumped up my grade.
Oh, boo.
It's fine. It's murder. It's fine. I have Thoughtstalker Warlock at number 1. Like I said, number 2, I have Moonstone Harbinger. This is 2 and a black for a 1/3 flying Death Touch bat. And whenever you gain or lose life during your turn, bats you control get +1/+0 and gain Death Touch until end of turn. Triggers only once each turn. I think that's like a huge pull into a bats deck, and it feels like very signposty to me, a reason to do something. And then I'm putting my money where my mouth is on Sinister Monolith, 3 and a black artifact. Each opponent loses a life, and you gain a life at the beginning of combat on your turn. And you can tap, pay 2 life, sack it to draw 2 cards at sorcery speed.
All right, what you got going on in red?
We got Quake Tusk Boar at number 1, 3 red for a 5/5 elemental boar with reach, trample, and haste. That card is going to hit like a brick. Number 2, I've got Brazen Collector, 1 and a red for a 2/1 raccoon rogue with first strike. And when it attacks, you add red. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. And number 3, I've got Heartfire Hero, the single red 1/1 with Valiant. Get a +1/+1 counter on it, and when it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent.
I've got the same number 1 and 2, the Boar and the Collector. In the number 3 slot, I've got a synergistic removal spell. I've got Rabid Gnaw, 1 and a red for an instant, uncommon. Target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Presumably, you're hopefully triggering a Valiant card with that. Then it deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control.
Yeah, love that. How about green?
Green, number 1, we've got the Moose. Galewind Moose 4GG, because it's going to be good game again when you cast this card. Uncommon, 6/6 flash, vigilance, reach, trample. What doesn't that card do? It's insane. Number 2, got Hunter's Talent. This is 1 and a green for a class. When it enters, target creature you control deals damage to its power to target creature you don't control. Level 2 costs 1 and a green. Whenever you attack, target attacking creature gets +1/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. At level 3, 3 and a green at the beginning of your end step. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. And then in the number 3 slot, I've got Brambleguard Veteran, the 1GG 3/4 raccoon that's going to be attacking as a 4/5 vigilance whenever you expend 4.
Yeah, I've got Hunter's Talent, the class enchantment, as my number 3. I've got the Moose is Loose as my number 2. And I've got my squirrel friend, Bushy Bodyguard, 1 and a green 2/1 with Offspring 2 as my number 1 green uncommon.
That being ahead of the Moose is suspect.
It's fair, but again, I'm taking my choice shots for my takes here.
I like it. All right, multicolor uncommons in the number 1 slot. I've got Seed Glaive Mentor, 1 red-white for an uncommon, 3/2 vigilance haste, Valiant. Whenever it becomes the target of a spell, the first time each turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. In the number 2 slot, I've got Starseer Mentor, 3 white-black for a 3/5 flying vigilance. At the beginning of your end step, if you gained or lost life this turn, target opponent loses 3 life unless they sack a non-land permanent or discard a card. And in the number 3 slot, I've got Burrowguard Mentor, green-white for an uncommon star trample, Rabbit Soldier. Power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures you control. Like, kind of a toss-up there for me between which 3 of the 4 white uncommons are going to be in. Did you put anything other than the white uncommons
that's
in
funny.
yours?
No, I didn't. But I do. I have the blue-white one over. I don't think, I think red-white looks like a good deck. I'm less excited about the red-white signpost than I am about. I think the blue-white signpost is a better card, but I think red-white as a deck is better. The blue-white signpost is the 1 white blue for a 2/3 flyer when it enters the battlefield. When it or another bird enters the battlefield under your control, you can put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control that doesn't have flying. But yeah, that's funny. Among all of our top 3 is all 4 white signposts. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, but you didn't put anything outside of a white signpost.
No,
there,
I
right?
did not. I did not.
Yeah, white looks pretty nuts.
All right, that's taking us on to our 10 notable commons. I'll go through my list first here, but we're going to chat about these cards. First up, I've got Carrot Cake. This is a take, another one of my takes. 1 and a white for a food. When it enters and when you sack it, you make a 1/1 white rabbit creature token and scry 1. And of course, it's a food, so you can pay 2, tap, sack it to gain 3 life.
Builder's talent, baby.
Builder's talent. I mean, truly bread and butter with that card. But I think that's just how I feel. I feel like this card just screams golden egg to me. Just screams like gonna glue so many different little things together. And much like feels forbidden friendship to me, that I'm like, yeah, I would actually be happy. Like in a weak pack, that's sort of like what this list is, I think, about. Is like commons that you would first be happy first picking. And this is a take, I think, because I could have put like 4 white commons in this list. But I wanted to have a chance to talk about Carrot Cake, that I think like I could take this. I'd be like, I don't really like these rares, don't really like these uncommons. Man, Carrot Cake is just going to really glue whatever I end up doing together.
I think it's a little inefficient, but I like the card.
And then my other white card on my list is Banishing Light. 2 and a white for an enchantment. Enters, you exile target non-land permanent opponent controls until Banishing Light leaves the battlefield. Power creep. It's common now.
It's common. It's boring as a common removal spell. I mean,
I agree.
It's going to be fine. I don't think that is going to be near the top white commons, personally.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
I think the creatures are going to matter more in white.
Okay. Yeah, I'm down for that. Moving on, I've got 1 blue card. It's Dire Downdraft. 3 and a blue for an instant. Costs 1 less to cast if it targets an attacking or tapped creature, and target creature's owner puts it on the top or bottom of their library. We got to have a shorthand for that, because it's not like... It's not grip, like it just bothers me that we have to read it. Like we know what this effect is, but we don't have a like term for it. Anyway, this card is good.
Yeah, that's the first one of yours that is in my list. I like that card quite a bit as well. Blue getting good interaction is great for blue.
Moving on to black, I've got a couple cards. Nocturnal Hunger, 2 and a black for an instant. Destroy target creature, and you can either gift a food when you cast this, or you have to lose 2 life.
Yeah, this is another one that's on my list. I think this is going to be a bread and butter interactive removal spell. Card is quite strong.
Interesting that just because of the color, I see you. I was like, this is like ostensibly worse than Banishing Light, but no, I guess like Nocturnal Hunger is an instant.
And Banishing Light gets blown out these days. Like there's modal disenchants running around everywhere.
That's
Banishing
fair.
Light is a way worse card. Like it's much easier to get off the battlefield now than it was. Like black decks just didn't used to be allowed to interact with enchantments, and now that's like stuff tacked on.
Now you
black
can pay 5 mana to have them sack an enchantment.
But that's a problem for Banishing Light, because presumably if they do that, it's very bad for you.
Yeah, that's true. I've also got Glide Dive Duo, 4 and a black for a 3/3 Bat Lizard with flying. When it enters, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Grasping Thrall is back.
Grasping Thrall 5 years later, or however many years later, is significantly less exciting to me.
I think this card still hits like a truck personally, but I mean, this is like, yeah, well, we remains to be seen. So we're halfway through my list and we have two of 5. Okay, 2 of 5 overlap. Take Out the Trash, I assume, is on yours as well. 1 and a red instant, deal 3 to target creature or planeswalker. If you control a raccoon, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Though this almost didn't make my list.
Whoa.
I mean, it's like
just because of the plethora of red removal?
Yeah, I think the next one is better, which I'm surprised I think is not on your list. Agate Assault is 2 and a red for a sorcery. Choose 1. It either deals 4 damage to a creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile instead, or you exile target artifact. All right, I take it back. I thought this was an instant. I still think it's on my list, but I don't think it's better than Take Out the Trash. Scratch that, reverse it, etc.
Yeah, Take Out the Trash is better than that card.
Yeah. And then a bit of another one of my takes. I'm putting Treetop Sentries on my list. 3 and a green, 2/4 Squirrel Archer with reach. When it enters, you may forage. If you do, draw a card. And this is off the back of, there are 2 2-drop commons that enable this. There's Cash Grab, which like double enables Forage in some senses, and there's the 2-mana 2/2 that makes a food. So I think like you're gonna really be able to have this be 4-mana 2/4 reach draw card. I think that's a card I could first pick.
Yeah, I like that take. It's hard for me to say that it's in the top 10 commons because it costs 4, and it'd be hard for me to imagine first picking. Like you're gonna have to take the other cards higher and then get that card late because presumably
I don't
nobody
think
else should
so.
want that.
No, I don't think so. Because there's 2. And that's just 2/2 drops. And there's other stuff that'll enable Forage for you.
That's fair. My current hot take is that Cash Grab is going to be wildly overrated after Modern Horizons 3.
I'm shocked that that's your hot take. And then I've got 2 multicolor cards, Head of the Homestead, 3 Selesnya for a 3/2. When it enters, you make 2 1/1 white rabbit creature tokens. This has to be in yours, right?
Yeah, that is in mine as well. Head of the Homestead is incredible. I think that's going to be one of the best commons in the set.
And I have Moonrise Cleric rounding out my top 10. 1 Orzhov for a 2/3 flyer. When it attacks, you gain a life.
Yeah, that card is excellent. Going to be very good wherever it's played. Super excellent in white-black. That one is also on my list. So we've got 5 of my 10 down.
Okay.
We've got 5 remaining here. First up, we've got Pond Prophet, the Simic hybrid for the 1/1 ETBs. Draw a card.
If blue-green is good, that card's going to be good.
But it's also just, I guess it's a little hard to cast in a non-blue-green deck. Yeah. That's what I was thinking. Okay, blue-green gold card. Maybe that doesn't belong in here. Next one, I am shocked is not in your list. This is my pick for, I think, best common of the set. This is Intrepid Rabbit, 2 and a white for a 3/2 at common with Offspring 1.
Mm-hmm.
Would have been very easy for this Offspring cost to be 2. When this creature enters, target creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn. This gives you a 3/2 plus a 1/1 plus 2 Valiant triggers or just pushing damage, like two targets somewhere else. Intrepid Rabbit is insane. This is going to be a data darling. Intrepid Rabbit is nuts.
Yeah, Intrepid Rabbit not being on my list. If you went first, I might have cut Agate Assault for it for sure.
Takes us on to another one I am shocked is not on your list. Baker's Bane Duo, 1 and a green for a 2/2 common. When ETBs make a food token, whenever you expend 4, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. This is rectangles at their finest. This card, what's not to like about this card? It's giving you a 2/2 plus a food, and then randomly, it doesn't have to be in red-green, starting on turn 4, potentially is going to be bashing as a 3/3. This card is a stat machine.
Yeah, but it doesn't retain the counter. I think the second line of text is largely irrelevant on this card, but I really like 2-mana 2/2 get a food. I just think it's fodder for my thing that draws me a card, and I wanted to shout that card out more.
Sure, but the second line of text is not nothing. Your 2-mana 3/3 is great.
No. But it doesn't stay a 3/3.
But it attacks as a 3/3.
You remember? No, stop. You remember the 2-drop from Eldraine, the 1 and a green 2/2 that like when you cast an adventure grew? That card was garbage. Like it just didn't matter at all. That is what this line of text is.
No, because this line of text happens for free. You had to build your deck in a certain way for that to happen. Expend is something you just naturally, it takes no work. You're going to be expending 4.
I don't know why we're arguing about this card. I like this card.
I guess my incredulity is that, which is probably why you're offended, because I'm incredulous. But like this is like Intrepid Rabbit levels of good to me. The card we just shouted out. Like I think these are going to be very good cards in the data.
I like. Wow. Why are you, Ben Werney, saying data to me on today of all days? Like what? Because it isn't out yet.
Because it isn't out yet, and I want to have cool hot takes and say, "See, I was right." But I think we're trying to pick the 10, maybe not the 10 best data cards, but the 10 best.
You're trying to predict the top 10 game in hand win rate cards that you're never going to look at because you don't look at that. Like, what are we doing here?
No, I'm trying to predict the 10 commons that are the best commons in the set.
Yes.
I think Baker's Bane Duo is one of those.
Great.
Next, I've got Heaped Harvest. It's 2 and a green for the food. When it ETBs and when you sack it, you can search your library for basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. You can sack it to gain 3 life as well. We talked about that card and the gradation differences. Heaped Harvest is a really cool card.
This is your hottest of hot takes. This is your hottest of hot takes.
Yes, but I don't think it's unreasonable to have as a hot take. But if brewing is possible, Heaped Harvest is going to be great. If it's not, It
But
won't.
brewing will never be as good as having a good streamlined deck. And so this can't be that
Depends on
good.
how good the streamlined decks are, but yeah, I feel I'm smelling what you're stepping in. Next is Alania's Pathmaker. This is 3 in a red for a 4/2 at common. When it enters, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically just 4 mana, 4/2 draw a card.
Yeah, I mean, that's not nothing.
Oh, it does
Like,
it does cramp your style a little bit.
it does. I agree.
Like,
But I think the potential's there. That's a tough one to evaluate, but I like being optimistic on it to start.
I'm fine with that as a take. Yeah, man, I almost made it. My blood pressure, I think, was good until we started talking about Baker's Bane Duo. Then I just lost it.
Okay, can I run my sleeper comments past you? This is a
Yeah.
segment that I would like to do, and curious to see if it has any pull for the listeners. So I'll list my sleeper comments. You don't have to do any of yours. I don't think you put a list together, but I think as we're trying to feel out, we want to experiment with this section of the podcast to see what is most interesting or what is most valuable to the listeners. And I think it could be cool if we're going to put less weight on the commons, which I agree. Like, I like doing the top 10 notable commons thing as opposed to trying to predict, because usually in the number 3 slot or whatever, you're doing situational cards anyway and trying to predict what decks are best. So I think shouting some commons that are like quote unquote sleepers, like, and if you're not familiar with that term, like cards that go later than they should, but like kind of hidden gem type cards, that either are maybe something that people are going to underappreciate,
perhaps
or just are only going to not a data darling, or are only going to excel in one archetype. So some sleeper commons to shout: Life Creed Duo. This is 1 and a white for a common 1/2 bat bird with flying. Whenever the creature you control enters, you gain 1 life.
Love this card.
Yeah, like potential to be absurd in white black if white black can pop off. Similarly, Sonar Strike, 1 and a white for an instant, deals 4 damage to target attacking, blocking, or tapped creature. It's a lot of different options there. And you gain 3 life if you control a bat. So you're going to get all your life gain synergies triggered there by a removal spell. So in a world where we've got all this removal, a synergistic removal spell then is going to be a cut above the rest. So I think Sonar Strike's got some potential.
Similar to Intrepid Rabbit, Sonar Strike was almost in my top 10 as well.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah.
Next, Agate Blade Assassin, 1 and a black for a 1/3 at common. Whenever it attacks, defending player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. I could see this card being horrifically annoying to play against. And again, like, I don't know that this necessarily has to be red-black. Like, this could be good in white-black as well.
Right.
I really like Agate Blade Assassin. It's a hard one to evaluate.
I'm on the fence because, like, I see what you see, but then I also see they have a 3/2 in play.
Yeah, and maybe it's you back it up with tricks. Like, maybe that's where the +2/+0 indestructible lifelink trick, like to just keep jamming over and over with this card. Like, imagine if you get 2 of these down and you're cracking and then you're draining for 2, gaining 2, and they don't have blocks. Like,
and then you're ostensibly triggering some damage matters or life gain matters stuff.
Right. So I like Agate Blade Assassin. Bellowing Crier, this almost made my top 10 list. Probably should have. 1 and a blue for a 2/1. When it enters, you draw a card, then discard a card.
Yeah, this effect is always better than we think. Plus good types in Frog, plus fueling, either foraging or threshold.
Yeah, the card just does a lot.
Yep.
And then lastly, Polywallop, 3 and a green for an instant, cost 1 less to cast for each frog you control. Target creature you control deals damage equal to twice as power to target creature you don't control. This is not news, but I mean, we kind of talked about it last week. But I like this as a sleeper removal spell for the Frogs deck.
Yeah, I mean, it won't be a sleeper removal spell for the Frogs deck. It's very clearly a removal
kind of in your
spell.
face. Yeah, this whole set is kind of slapping you around with what to do with the cards.
All right. Who thought that the crash course for Bloomburrow would have been longer than the crash course for Modern Horizons 3? But here we are.
But I think there are a couple things happening. And again, would like feedback from listeners in the Discord and on Twitter if you're not in the Discord, or shoot us an email, lordsoflimited@gmail.com. I think we're trying to experiment with what's going to make this the most effective for the listeners. And I think it should change with play boosters. I think we are right about that. And I think this is our first swing at it, which is why it was a little longer.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it'll be a little smaller after editing. But I think this might be the right answer. Maybe we'll experiment more in the future. But if there's stuff you liked about this, stuff you didn't, let us know. If you got ideas for other ones, hit us with them. We might use them. We might not. Don't be offended if we don't. But, more ideas about how to make the crash course better can only be a good thing.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, honestly, so many. There's so many times that we get great ideas, especially about the crash course or 50 takes from the Discord. But then they slip through the cracks because I'm like, oh, gotta remember that for next time. But more often than not, I'm like, when this episode is coming around, will you please send this to me again so I remember it close to? It's sort of like wanting to like hash out the grading scale. I'm always like, yeah, we should do that. And then the crash course is just, and we're doing it again. So
yeah,
someday.
All right. I think that's it. Any parting thoughts for you to get out about Bloomburrow?
I think despite all of our many arguments, one thing I definitely agree with you on is white is where I want to be at the start of the format.
Yeah, that's my feeling as well. It's gonna be white or bust. I could see this being kind of what was the format with the caves?
Oh,
It was
Lost
no good.
Caverns.
Yeah, I could see this being kind of LCI-esque with Jeskai, like low curve stuff ruling the roost. I'm a little worried about that. And then the foraging stuff. But some of that stuff's pushed enough, like that forage and blue-black maybe get there. But that's how the format's shaping up to me. It looks like Jeskai versus Sultai, kind of how it was in LCI. And hopefully the delta between Jeskai and Sultai is not quite as large as it was in that format.
Right. Yeah, I hope so.
All right, good place to wrap us up. Thank you, as always, to Salty Pretzels for our intro and outro music. Make sure you give it a listen.
You can find all of our content on our website, lordsoflimited.com. There's links to our episode backlog, our YouTube channel, our Twitch streams, our Patreon page, our merch, courtesy of TeePublic, as I sip my coffee out of my Lords of Limited mug here on the YouTube channel. All of that is available at lordsoflimited.com.
If you've got any feedback about the show or any questions, shoot us an email at lordsoflimited@gmail.com.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next week for another episode of Lords of Limited.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.